Nurse, it's time to administer pain medication. The pain is very bad.
Miss Rodriguez, according to the new protocol, we have to reassess before administering opioids.
Nurse ignored female veteran's pain. Then her Navy SEAL son arrived with his team. The morphine drip had been disconnected for 6 hours, but Staff Sergeant Ret Elena Rodriguez wasn't allowed to scream. Pain management protocols. Nurse Patricia Hawkins had declared with clipboard authority, dismissing 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star as typical drug-seeking behavior. But when Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez received his mother's whispered 911 call, he wasn't just bringing medical advocacy, he was bringing his entire SEAL team. Elena's weathered hands clutched the hospital bed rails, her back screaming with shrapnel fragments that had been her unwelcome companions since Fallujah. 23 years of military service, 3 combat deployments, and a medical discharge that had cost her everything except her dignity until today. The civilian hospital saw a middle-aged Hispanic woman with an addiction problem. They were about to learn what a decorated combat veteran actually looked like. What happened next would transform one hospital's understanding of military sacrifice and prove that some battles are fought in medical corridors, not foreign battlefields. St. Mary's Regional Medical Center sat like a fortress of bureaucratic indifference in downtown San Antonio, Texas, where military families mixed uneasily with civilian healthcare providers who'd never seen combat's aftermath. The hospital's emergency department processed thousands of patients monthly, but their understanding of military trauma was limited to weekend warrior stereotypes and addiction assumptions. In 2025, the opioid crisis had transformed legitimate pain management into criminalized suffering, with veterans bearing the brunt of institutional suspicion. Elena Rodriguez had earned her stripes the hard way, 23 years in the Army, rising from private to staff sergeant through competence rather than connections. Her first deployment to Afghanistan had been routine peacekeeping. Her second deployment to Iraq had been urban warfare. Her third deployment to Syria had ended when an IED blast sent shrapnel through her spine, leaving her with chronic pain that defied civilian understanding. The fragments couldn't be removed without risking paralysis, leaving her dependent on carefully managed pain medication that allowed her to function. The transition from decorated soldier to disabled veteran had been brutal. Military doctors understood combat injuries and prescribed appropriate pain management. Civilian doctors saw a middle-aged woman seeking opioids. Their training focused on addiction prevention rather than veteran care. The VA system was overwhelmed, appointments scheduled months in advance, leaving veterans to navigate civilian health care that viewed their service-connected injuries with suspicion. Her son, Marcus, had inherited her fighting spirit along with her sense of duty. Navy SEAL Chief Petty Officer, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Somalia, currently stationed at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado. His team, 6 operators who'd fought alongside him through the most dangerous missions the military offered, had become his extended family. When Marcus called about his mother's mistreatment, they didn't hesitate to provide support. The hospital's civilian culture was toxic to military families. Staff members who'd never worn uniforms questioned veteran service records, dismissing combat injuries as pre-existing conditions or psychological issues. The bias was subtle but systematic: longer wait times, skeptical questioning, and the assumption that military service made patients difficult rather than deserving of respect. Elena's case crystallized everything wrong with civilian health care for veterans. Nurse Patricia Hawkins embodied institutional prejudice disguised as medical protocol. Her 15 years of experience had taught her to view pain medication requests with suspicion, particularly from patients who looked like they might be drug-seeking. Elena's military-bearing precise description of her injuries and detailed medical history were interpreted as rehearsed stories rather than evidence of legitimate suffering. The nurse's authority was absolute in her domain, protected by hospital policies that prioritized liability over patient care. The emergency department's policy on pain management was designed to prevent prescription drug abuse, but its implementation discriminated against veterans whose injuries required ongoing medication. The system assumed that requests for pain relief were inherently suspicious, requiring patients to prove their suffering rather than receive appropriate treatment. Elena's military medical records, properly documented and officially verified, were dismissed as insufficient evidence by staff who'd never seen combat wounds. The broader context was a healthcare system that had failed to adapt to treating combat veterans. The increase in veteran population combined with inadequate training for civilian healthcare providers created a perfect storm of misunderstanding and mistreatment. Veterans advocates had been fighting for years to improve civilian healthcare training, but progress was slow and bureaucratic resistance was high. Elena's case would become a catalyst for change, but only after her son and his team forced the hospital to confront their institutional biases. The battle was about to shift from foreign battlefields to American hospitals, where the enemy was ignorance and the stakes were veterans' lives. The call came at 0347 hours Pacific time, piercing through Marcus's sleep like incoming artillery. His mother's voice, normally steady with military composure, was barely a whisper. "Marcus, I need help. They won't give me my pain medication. They think I'm an addict." The words hit him like a physical blow, his protective instincts activating with combat intensity. Elena's situation was desperate. She'd been admitted to St. Mary's emergency department after a fall that had aggravated her combat injuries. The pain was excruciating, but the attending physician had ordered her pain medication discontinued after Nurse Hawkins reported drug-seeking behavior. The hospital's pain management protocol required psychological evaluation before resuming medication, a process that could take days while Elena suffered in agony. "Mom, I'm coming, and I'm bringing backup." Marcus promised, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never abandoned a mission. "Tell me exactly what they said." Elena's recounting was heartbreaking. She looked at my medical records and said, "We see this all the time. Military patients who get hooked on pain pills and tell elaborate stories about combat injuries." She actually said that, "Marcus, she called my service record an elaborate story." The rage building in Marcus's chest was controlled but deadly. His mother had sacrificed everything for her country, earning decorations through blood and courage, only to be dismissed as a fraud by someone who'd never faced enemy fire. The insult was personal, but the injustice was systematic, a healthcare system that punished veterans for their service. His team was preparing for pre-deployment training, but this mission took precedence over everything. Chief Petty Officer Jason Tank, Williams Hospital, Corpsman, First Class. Miguel Santos, Petty Officer, First Class. David Dock, Chin Petty Officer, Second Class. Alex Ryder, Thompson, and Petty Officer 3rd Class, Carlos Buzz Martinez, 6 operators who'd fought through hell together and never left anyone behind. The mission planning was swift and comprehensive. Marcus coordinated with the Naval Special Warfare Command chaplain to ensure their intervention would be professional and effective. The goal wasn't confrontation, but education, showing civilian healthcare providers what military service actually meant and why veterans deserved better treatment. Tank, the team's communications specialist, researched St. Mary's pain management protocols and veteran care policies. The hospital's training was minimal, their understanding of combat injuries limited to textbook theory. Santos, their medic, compiled Elena's complete military medical records, including classified mission reports that documented her injury's severity. Chen, their intelligence analyst, identified key hospital administrators and staff members who could implement policy changes. The preparation phase revealed the scope of the problem. St. Mary's had treated 247 veterans in the past year, with 34% reporting inadequate pain management and 67% experiencing some form of discrimination. The hospital's staff training on military culture was non-existent, their policies based on civilian assumptions rather than veteran realities. Marcus's approach was strategic rather than emotional. We're not going to intimidate anyone. We're going to educate them. They're going to learn about military service combat injuries and why my mother deserves respect instead of suspicion. The team's coordination was flawless. Thompson arranged transportation from Coronado to San Antonio, while Martinez coordinated with veteran advocacy groups for additional support. The mission wasn't just about Elena. It was about every veteran who'd been mistreated by civilian healthcare providers who didn't understand military sacrifice. The first breakthrough came when Santos contacted the hospital's administrator, Dr. James Morrison, a former Air Force flight surgeon who understood the problem immediately. "Chief, I've been fighting this battle for 3 years. Our civilian staff needs education, not criticism. Your mother's case could be the catalyst we need for real change." The alliance with Dr. Morrison transformed the mission from confrontation to collaboration. The hospital's veteran advocate, Sarah Chen, no relation to Doc Chen, provided intelligence on institutional resistance and suggested strategies for implementing change. The network was building with military medical professionals and veteran advocates, creating a coalition that could force systemic reform. Marcus's final preparation was emotional. He reviewed his mother's service record, her citations for valor, her sacrifice for country. "She earned every medal on that wall," he whispered to his team. "Time to make sure they understand what that means." The situation at St. Mary's deteriorated rapidly as Elena's pain intensified without medication. Nurse Hawkins had documented her drug-seeking behavior in official records, creating a permanent black mark that would follow Elena to other healthcare providers. The nurse's authority was absolute in her domain, protected by hospital policies that prioritized liability over patient care. Elena's medical crisis was compounded by institutional prejudice. Her requests for pain relief were interpreted as addictive behavior, her military medical records dismissed as unverified claims, and her service decorations ignored as irrelevant to current medical needs. The psychological evaluation required for pain medication reinstatement was scheduled for the following week, leaving Elena to suffer in agony while bureaucratic processes slowly ground forward. The hospital's response to Elena's family advocacy was defensive and dismissive. When Marcus's initial phone calls requesting information about his mother's treatment were met with privacy laws and bureaucratic stonewalling, the institutional bias became clear. Military families were treated as problems to be managed rather than patients to be served. The escalation began when Marcus arrived at St. Mary's in dress blues, his ribbon rack telling the story of multiple combat deployments and exceptional service. The impact was immediate. Staff members who dismissed Elena's claims suddenly faced visual evidence of military excellence. His presence alone shifted the power dynamic, forcing civilian healthcare providers to confront their assumptions about military service. Nurse Hawkins's response to Marcus's arrival was revealing. "Sir, your mother is being treated according to our standard pain management protocols. Military service doesn't entitle patients to special treatment." The statement crystallized the institutional prejudice that viewed military service as irrelevant to medical care, rather than essential context for understanding combat injuries. Marcus's initial approach was diplomatic but firm. "Ma'am, I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for appropriate treatment based on my mother's documented medical condition and service-connected injuries." His military bearing and calm professionalism created a stark contrast to the staff's defensive posture. The situation escalated when Dr. Patricia Stevens, the attending physician, supported Nurse Hawkins's assessment. "Your mother's symptoms are consistent with prescription drug dependence. We've seen this pattern before with military patients who've been overprescribed pain medication." The accusation was devastating. Elena's legitimate medical needs were being criminalized by healthcare providers who'd never treated combat injuries. Marcus's team arrived in phases, each member contributing specific expertise to the intervention. Tank's communication skills proved invaluable in coordinating with hospital administration, while Santos's medical knowledge provided authoritative counterarguments to the staff's assumptions. Chen's intelligence background helped identify key decision-makers and pressure points within the hospital hierarchy. The breakthrough came when Dr. Morrison, the hospital administrator and former Air Force flight surgeon, witnessed the team's professional conduct and Elena's obvious distress. His intervention was immediate and decisive. "Staff, we need to reassess our approach to this patient. Her military medical records are legitimate, her injuries are documented, and her pain is real." The institutional resistance intensified as the team's presence attracted attention from other hospital staff. Some medical professionals were curious about military service and combat injuries, while others were defensive about their treatment protocols. The divide was generational and educational. Younger staff members were more open to learning, while veteran staff members were entrenched in their biases. The media attention began when a local news crew tipped off by veteran advocacy groups arrived to cover the story. The hospital's public relations department went into crisis mode, attempting to control the narrative while protecting the institution's reputation. The story was becoming a public relations nightmare that threatened the hospital's standing in the community. Elena's transformation during this period was remarkable. Her initial helplessness and despair gave way to dignity and pride as she watched her son and his team advocate for her rights. "I never asked for special treatment," she told the news crew. "I just wanted to be treated like a human being who'd served her country." The psychological impact on Elena was profound. Years of civilian healthcare discrimination had eroded her confidence and self-worth, but her son's intervention reminded her of her value as a veteran and as a person. The team's respect and support validated her service in ways that civilian institutions had failed to provide. Marcus's character development was equally significant. His protective instincts for his mother merged with his professional understanding of leadership and advocacy. The mission became personal and institutional, protecting Elena while fighting for systemic change that would benefit all veterans. The team's cohesion was tested as they navigated civilian bureaucracy and institutional resistance. Their military training in teamwork and mission accomplishment proved invaluable in coordinating multiple interventions simultaneously. Each member contributed unique skills while maintaining unified purpose. The hospital's internal divisions became apparent as the situation escalated. Progressive staff members supported veteran advocacy and improved training, while conservative elements resisted change and defended existing protocols. The institutional culture was fracturing along generational and ideological lines. The crisis reached its peak when Elena's pain became so severe that her vital signs became unstable. The medical emergency forced the hospital to choose between their policies and their patients' welfare. The decision would define not just Elena's treatment, but the institution's commitment to veteran care. The medical emergency struck at 1400 hours when Elena's pain reached crisis levels that triggered dangerous physiological responses. Her blood pressure spiked to 190/110, her heart rate accelerated to 140 beats per minute, and her breathing became shallow and rapid. The untreated pain from her combat injuries was causing systemic stress that threatened her life, but Nurse Hawkins remained convinced that Elena was performing to obtain drugs. Dr. Stevens's response to the crisis was callous and revealing. This is typical behavior for drug-seeking patients. They escalate their symptoms when standard protocols don't produce the desired medication. The statement was delivered with clinical detachment that ignored Elena's obvious distress and the medical evidence of her deteriorating condition. Marcus watched his mother suffer, while civilian healthcare providers dismissed her pain as behavioral manipulation. The woman who'd survived IED blasts and carried wounded soldiers to safety was being treated like a criminal by people who'd never faced enemy fire. His professional composure cracked as he witnessed institutional cruelty disguised as medical protocol. The breaking point came when Elena lost consciousness from pain-induced shock. Her body, weakened by years of combat injuries and recent medical stress, couldn't sustain the assault of untreated suffering. The medical emergency that followed was entirely preventable, a direct result of institutional bias and inadequate veteran care. Dr. Morrison's intervention was immediate and decisive. Code Blue Room 314, all staff respond immediately. The emergency response team worked to stabilize Elena, while Marcus and his team watched helplessly from the hallway. The irony was devastating. The hospital was fighting to save a life that their own policies had endangered. Nurse Hawkins' reaction to the crisis was defensive and self-serving. Her condition deteriorated despite our best efforts. Some patients are simply non-compliant with standard treatment protocols. The attempt to blame Elena for her own suffering was breathtaking in its callousness and ignorance. The team's response was controlled but deadly serious. Tank coordinated with base command to ensure military medical experts were available for consultation. Santos documented every aspect of Elena's treatment for potential legal action. Chen compiled evidence of institutional bias and discriminatory practices. The mission had evolved from advocacy to accountability. The darkest moment came when Elena's heart rate became dangerously irregular, threatening cardiac arrest. The woman who'd survived multiple combat deployments was dying in an American hospital because civilian healthcare providers couldn't distinguish between legitimate medical need and drug-seeking behavior. The institutional failure was complete and potentially fatal. Marcus's breaking point arrived when he confronted Dr. Stevens directly. "Doctor, that woman has 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. She survived enemy fire IED blasts and carried wounded soldiers to safety. She's not a drug addict. She's a combat veteran whose pain you refuse to treat." The doctor's response was predictable and infuriating. "Military service doesn't change medical protocols. We treat all patients according to standard procedures." The statement revealed the fundamental problem civilian healthcare providers who viewed military service as irrelevant to medical care rather than essential context for understanding patient needs. The crisis deepened when Elena's condition required intensive care unit admission. The woman who'd entered the hospital with manageable pain now faced life-threatening complications from untreated suffering. The medical emergency was entirely preventable, a direct result of institutional bias and inadequate training. Dr. Morrison's emergency intervention saved Elena's life, but couldn't undo the institutional damage. The hospital's reputation was in free fall, veteran advocacy groups were mobilizing, and media attention was intensifying. The crisis had become a public relations disaster that threatened the institution's credibility and funding. The team's decision to stay and fight rather than transfer Elena to a military medical facility was strategic and symbolic. Marcus understood that running away wouldn't solve the systemic problem. Other veterans would face the same discrimination and mistreatment. The battle had to be fought here, in this hospital, with this staff, to create lasting change. The psychological impact on all involved was profound. Elena's faith in civilian healthcare was shattered, her trust in institutions undermined by systematic betrayal. Marcus's respect for civilian medical professionals was permanently damaged by witnessing preventable suffering. The team's understanding of veteran advocacy was deepened by confronting institutional bias firsthand. The hospital's internal crisis was equally severe. Progressive staff members were horrified by Elena's treatment and demanded immediate policy changes. Conservative elements defended existing protocols and resisted calls for reform. The institutional culture was fragmenting under the weight of public scrutiny and professional shame. The moment of truth was approaching. Elena's life hung in the balance not just from medical crisis, but from institutional failure. The hospital would either learn from their mistakes and implement meaningful reform or continue defending policies that endangered veteran lives. The choice would define not just Elena's recovery, but the future of veteran healthcare at St. Mary's. The transformation began when Dr. Morrison took direct control of Elena's care, overriding the pain management protocols that had endangered her life. This patient is a decorated combat veteran with documented service-connected injuries. She will receive appropriate pain management immediately. His intervention was both medical and moral, acknowledging that Elena's suffering was real and treatable. The immediate response was dramatic. Elena's vital signs stabilized within 30 minutes of receiving proper pain medication, her blood pressure normalizing, and her heart rate returning to safe levels. The medical evidence was undeniable. Her pain was legitimate, her need for medication was real, and the hospital's policies had nearly killed her. Marcus's team coordinated a comprehensive intervention that addressed both immediate medical needs and long-term systemic change. Santos worked with Dr. Morrison to develop a veteran-specific pain management protocol that recognized combat injuries as unique medical conditions requiring specialized treatment. Chen coordinated with veteran advocacy groups to ensure Elena's case became a catalyst for broader reform. The hospital's response was swift and comprehensive. Dr. Patricia Stevens was placed on administrative leave pending investigation of her treatment decisions. Nurse Hawkins was reassigned to non-patient care duties while undergoing mandatory training on veteran health care. The institution's leadership recognized that Elena's case represented a systemic failure that required immediate and decisive action. The media attention reached national levels when Elena's story was featured on major news networks. The image of a decorated combat veteran being denied pain medication by civilian healthcare providers who'd never served their country struck a nerve with the American public. The story became a symbol of institutional failure and the urgent need for veteran healthcare reform. Marcus's address to the hospital staff was delivered with the authority of someone who'd earned his right to speak. My mother served this country for 23 years. She was wounded in combat defending the freedoms you enjoy every day. She earned every medal on that wall through blood and sacrifice. When she asks for pain medication, she's not seeking drugs. She's seeking relief from injuries sustained in service to America. The impact was immediate and emotional. Staff members who dismissed Elena's claims suddenly confronted the reality of military service and sacrifice. Her decorations weren't just pieces of metal, they were evidence of courage, dedication, and wounds suffered in defense of others. The visual impact of her military record, properly explained and contextualized, transformed understanding throughout the hospital. Dr. Morrison's presentation to the medical staff was comprehensive and devastating. We failed this patient in every possible way. We ignored her medical records, dismissed her service, and nearly killed her through institutional bias. This cannot happen again. His leadership was crucial in transforming crisis into opportunity for systematic reform. The hospital's commitment to change was immediate and comprehensive. A veteran healthcare coordinator position was created and filled by a former military medical officer. All staff members were required to complete veteran cultural competency training. Pain management protocols were revised to recognize combat injuries as legitimate medical conditions requiring specialized treatment. Elena's recovery was remarkable once she received appropriate medical care. Her pain levels decreased significantly, her vital signs stabilized, and her confidence returned as she experienced respectful treatment from healthcare providers who understood her service. The transformation was proof that proper veteran healthcare was possible when institutions committed to change. The team's educational mission expanded beyond Elena's case to encompass broader veteran healthcare issues. They worked with hospital administration to develop comprehensive training programs that would prepare civilian healthcare providers to treat combat veterans with the respect and understanding they deserved. The breakthrough came when Elena herself addressed the hospital staff during a training session. "I didn't serve my country for 23 years to be treated like a criminal when I needed medical care. I served to protect the freedoms and institutions that make America great. All I asked for was dignity and appropriate treatment for injuries sustained in that service." Her words carried the weight of lived experience and earned authority. The staff members who dismissed her claims were forced to confront the reality of her sacrifice and the inadequacy of their response. The moment was transformative for everyone present, creating understanding that policy changes alone couldn't achieve. The hospital's implementation of veteran-specific healthcare protocols was swift and comprehensive. Emergency department staff received specialized training on combat injuries and military culture. Pain management protocols were revised to recognize service-connected injuries as legitimate medical conditions. A veteran patient advocate position was created to ensure appropriate treatment and prevent future discrimination. The legal implications of Elena's case were significant. The hospital faced potential lawsuits for discrimination and inadequate care, but their commitment to reform and Elena's desire for systemic change rather than personal compensation led to a settlement that funded comprehensive veteran health care improvements. The broader impact extended far beyond St. Mary's Regional Medical Center. Elena's case became a model for veteran healthcare advocacy, inspiring similar reforms at hospitals nationwide. The story demonstrated that individual cases of discrimination could catalyze systemic change when supported by effective advocacy and media attention. Marcus's leadership throughout the crisis was exemplary. His ability to balance protective instincts with strategic thinking, to coordinate multiple interventions simultaneously, and to maintain professional composure under extreme stress demonstrated the leadership qualities that made him an effective SEAL operator. His mother's crisis had become a mission that he executed with the same precision and dedication he brought to military operations. The team's cohesion and effectiveness throughout the intervention proved that military training and values translated directly to civilian advocacy. Their ability to work as a unit, support each other through crisis, and maintain focus on mission objectives demonstrated why military units were so effective in high-stress situations. The hospital's transformation was comprehensive and lasting. Staff attitudes toward veterans improved dramatically. Pain management protocols were revised to recognize combat injuries, and veteran-specific training became mandatory for all healthcare providers. The institution that had nearly killed Elena through institutional bias became a model for veteran healthcare excellence. The resolution was both personal and institutional. Elena received the medical care she deserved, her dignity was restored, and her service was properly honored. The hospital implemented systematic reforms that would prevent future discrimination against veterans. The healthcare system learned valuable lessons about treating combat veterans with the respect and understanding they'd earned through service. The final ceremony was powerful and moving. Elena was honored by the hospital administration, her military service was formally recognized, and her case was acknowledged as a catalyst for positive change. The woman who'd been dismissed as a drug-seeking patient was celebrated as a decorated veteran whose sacrifice had made America safer. Marcus's reflection on the mission was profound. We don't abandon our own whether on foreign battlefields or in American hospitals. My mother served with honor, and she deserved to be treated with honor. This mission reminded me that the battles for veteran rights continue long after the shooting stops. The Elena Rodriguez Protocol became the standard for veteran health care at St. Mary's Regional Medical Center and inspired similar reforms at hospitals nationwide. The comprehensive approach to veteran care included specialized training for all healthcare providers, revised pain management protocols that recognized combat injuries as legitimate medical conditions, and the creation of veteran patient advocate positions to ensure appropriate treatment. The immediate consequences were transformative. Elena's case led to systematic review of veteran care practices, resulting in policy changes that affected thousands of veterans seeking civilian health care. The hospital's commitment to reform was demonstrated through substantial investment in veteran-specific training and resources, proving that institutional change was possible when leadership was committed to improvement. The broader impact extended throughout the healthcare industry. The Department of Veterans Affairs partnered with civilian hospitals to develop comprehensive veteran care standards, ensuring that combat veterans received appropriate treatment regardless of where they sought medical care. The initiative became a model for civilian-military cooperation in healthcare, demonstrating that institutional barriers could be overcome through education and advocacy. Elena's transformation from dismissed patient to respected veteran was complete and inspiring. Her recovery was remarkable. Once she received appropriate medical care, her confidence returned as she experienced respectful treatment, and her advocacy for other veterans became a powerful force for continued reform. The woman who'd been treated like a criminal became a symbol of veteran resilience and the importance of proper health care. Marcus's leadership throughout the crisis demonstrated the effectiveness of military training in civilian advocacy. His ability to coordinate multiple interventions simultaneously maintain professional composure under extreme stress and achieve mission objectives despite institutional resistance proved that military skills translated directly to veteran advocacy. His example inspired other military families to advocate for their loved ones and demand appropriate treatment. The team's cohesion and effectiveness throughout the intervention became a case study in military unit effectiveness applied to civilian challenges. Their ability to work as a unified force, support each other through crisis, and maintain focus on mission objectives demonstrated why military training was so valuable in high-stress situations. The SEAL team's intervention became a model for military unit involvement in veteran advocacy. The hospital's comprehensive transformation proved that institutional change was possible when leadership was committed to improvement. Staff attitudes toward veterans improved dramatically. Pain management protocols were revised to recognize combat injuries, and veteran-specific training became mandatory for all healthcare providers. The institution that had nearly killed Elena through institutional bias became a model for veteran healthcare excellence. The long-term impact continued to expand as Elena's story reached national attention. Congressional hearings on veteran healthcare discrimination led to federal legislation requiring veteran cultural competency training for all healthcare providers receiving federal funding. The Elena Rodriguez Act became landmark legislation that protected veteran rights and ensured appropriate medical treatment for service-connected injuries. Elena's legacy was profound and lasting. Her case demonstrated that individual advocacy could catalyze systemic change, that military families would fight for their loved ones, and that American institutions could learn from their mistakes and implement meaningful reform. The veteran, who'd been dismissed as a drug-seeking patient, became a catalyst for transforming veteran healthcare throughout America. The universal message was clear: veterans who'd sacrificed for their country deserved medical care that honored their service rather than criminalized their injuries. Elena Rodriguez's story proved that courage, advocacy, and institutional accountability could transform healthcare for all veterans.